Buenos dias. Good morning, everybody. My name is Victoria Cervantes. I'm a CHCI Public Policy Fellow, and I'm happy to be welcoming you all to this session, Our Virtual Life, Latinos in America. It's an apt title that encompasses our integrated relationship with technology and in the digital space. Whether it be retail, social media, Latinos are at the forefront of all online communities in the digital realm, and as such should be included in discussions regarding our session. Session. On behalf of CHCI, I would like to thank DoorDash, Kapoor Center, Meta, and Opportune for their generous support of this session. Rob Menendez, the session chair, was unable to come to speak for this session due to votes. However, it is my pleasure to introduce our opening speaker, Shelley Marg. Shelley is a public policy manager on the U.S. federal policy team at Meta. Among other positions, she previously worked in the U.S. Senate, the U.S. House of Representatives, and as a U.S. policy advisor for the White House Office of Public Engagement. Please join me in welcoming Shelley Marg.
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests and advocates for a more connected and inclusive future, I stand before you on behalf of Meta, honored to be a sponsor of this critical conversation at the CHCI Tech Summit on our virtual life, Latinos online in America. In a world where the digital landscape has become an integral part of our lives, particularly for Latino Americans who spend more time online than other demographics, Meta is committed to fostering positive, meaningful interactions. As we navigate the vast virtual realm, we recognize the importance of social media and internet platforms in shaping the Latino experience, from staying informed to connecting with loved ones and beyond. Our dedication extends beyond creating digital spaces. We are actively invested in using technology to encourage positive interactions and healthy connections, both in the digital and physical realms. We believe in the power of technology to amplify diverse voices, bridge communities, and contribute to a more vibrant, well-rounded social life for all in America. Moreover, at Meta, we understand the responsibilities that come with creating virtual spaces. Our commitment to safety and inclusivity is unwavering. We are actively working on innovative solutions and policies to ensure that the digital spaces we facilitate are not only enjoyable, but also secure for Latino Americans. This involves ongoing collaboration with industry leaders, policymakers, and community advocates to address challenges and foster an environment where everyone feels welcome. As we explore our virtual life together today, let us collectively envision a future where technology acts as a force for unity, understanding, and empowerment within these communities. Meta is proud to be part of this journey, and we look forward to the insights and discussions that will undoubtedly shape the path towards a more connected and inclusive digital world. Thank you, CHCI, for providing this platform, and thank you to all the attendees for your commitment to building a positive and secure virtual space for Latino Americans. Together, we can create a digital future that reflects the richness and diversity of the Latino experience. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shelley. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's moderator, Jackie Padilla. Jackie Padilla is a senior video producer at Politico. She broke new ground in political news reporting by creating the Political Show on Snapchat, where she garnered videos that captured audiences around the globe. Jackie is also secretary of the National Association of the Hispanic Journalists at the DC chapter. Please join me in welcoming Jackie Padilla.
All right, ready to rock and roll? Before we get started, let me introduce you to our fantastic panel, and I know we could go on and on about how great you are, but for now I'm just gonna stick with your names and who you are representing today for this conversation. First, we have Cesar Escobar Vieira from University of Pittsburgh. Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
And then we have Keith Fernandez from DoorDash.
Good morning.
Gonzalo Palacio from Opportune.
Good morning.
And Lily Gangas from the Kapoor Center.
Morning.
And then we have all of you. Good morning. I feel like we could do a little better. Morning.
Yeah.
Thank you. Your participation is really going to be welcomed, especially at the end of this when we have a Q&A session. I know you know about the app that is available, so make sure that you utilize it. You can actually send your questions through there, and then at the end of this, you can do a survey about how much you liked our conversation and thought we were so great. So before we get started, Lily, I want to turn to you for some data, because I think that's going to be really important for this conversation. When we talk about how prominent the Latino community is online, especially when it comes to usage of social media and other resources. So how do we compare to other demographics just to understand the gravity of this?
Definitely, I'll have my little notes here, so get ready for the stats, because it's in our favor. So that's the punchline. The question is, what are we going to do with that power? It's what we're here to really discuss. So as you probably may hear all these different stats, right, how we're the fastest growing population. We provided 50% of the growth since the last census. We also account, when you look at the current talent in K through 12 education, more than 25% of the students in every single K through 12 school identifies as Latina. And 78% of the new workforce between now and 2030, 78% net new workers identify as Latinx, Latina, Hispanic, Latino. That's huge numbers, because as we think about where the economic growth is going, who's going to drive it really starts with you all in this room. And so I think it's really important to understand our power from those demographics, and also what we do not only in the classroom and the workforce, but what do we also do in our free time? What movies do we like to watch? Where do we get our music? Where do we get our news? What do we do when we're navigating online? And I think one of the interesting stats that, as I see also looking at the room, is thinking about how the Latinx population in the US is the youngest compared to all of the other demographics, with more than 58% being under the age of 34. So if you're under 34, raise your hand. Yep, pretty much. And then a little bit over 31% are under 17. So when we think about, I share those numbers to start, because when we think about the behaviors that we're seeing online, it's really driven by a lot of these two latter groups. We're seeing how, especially in Netflix, I'm sure you all have been Netflix and what do they call it? Netflix and chill.
I'm still on my ex's account.
Okay, great. Whatever you do, but we're basically driving a lot of the consumption in the platforms. More than 20% is coming from folks like you in this room than other counterparts. When we look especially at social media like Instagram and Snapchat for the teens from 13 to 17, 82% and 79% of Latinx youth are on social media, for better or for worse, because we're going to discuss some of the challenges there. And 1 in every 5 adults is on TikTok. So raise your hand if you have a TikTok account. Yep, again, see the stats here. TikTok is actually not only the place where you get to create more culturally relevant content, but this is where most of the youth is getting their news. Nobody watches TV anymore. You may do some Netflixing, you may do some Spotify and Bad Bunny, whatever the new releases is, you go to YouTube, but you're really consuming and really socializing on TikTok. And so that means to say that we have immense power as we're driving the content. However, we have to also make sure, and this is where the work that I do at the Caper Center really comes into play, we can't just be comfortable being the consumers, because we have to make sure that we're also being the creators, the designers, the owners, and the investors. And unfortunately, that's where we have a lot of work to do. So we have a report coming out in January from the Caper Center to specifically show that at the current rate of the population that we have of tech workers that identify as Latinx in corporate America, it would take till 2077 for us to reach parity. Think about how different the world's going to be in those years. Think about how different it's been just the last year since ChatGPT went viral. So we're not in those rooms in all these different areas where we're the creators, designers, innovators, then we're really going to be at a drawback, and especially when we think about that there's only 1% of the $100+ billion that went into investments in these types of platforms in the last 3 quarters, not the last year, just the last 3 quarters of 2023. And we're getting 1%. We only have 2% of investors who look like us in the other room. So there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
The optimistic side is why I started with the numbers of the demographics under 35. Because when we think about those students that are right now in high school learning about computer science, we have more than 75% of these students who are taking these classes. We have also more of you getting computing and engineering and any type of tech-enabled degrees. All that to say that there is just a huge opportunity and potential to keep investing in the education, the enablement, but also in the entrepreneurship ideas that a lot of our community has. And as we see the wave of AI, which is supposed to be $15 trillion of new growth, we want to make sure that we get more than just 1%. So I put that into the context setting of the conversation today.
I think you bring up a couple good points that this is not just talking about like, wow, we're really great on social media and we occupy this space. This is a bigger conversation about, that means there's jobs that you should be looking at. That means you can get exposure in different ways and you can reach to other communities to get whatever call to action that you have out there. So this isn't just about like, well, good for us, we have the most profiles. This is about how can we enter that ecosystem in so many different ways to say, hello, we're here and we're not going anywhere. And I think an important thing to flag is that it might be TikTok today, but we could wake up tomorrow and TikTok be gone, like RIP Vine. Right? Like it doesn't matter the app. As long as you're comfortable on it, you can utilize any app that's gonna come, who knows, in the next 10 years. I feel like it's like a cliche saying, but there's an app for that. There's literally an app for, I'm convinced, everything. But man, I love delivery apps. They make my life so convenient. Keith, how significant though, beyond just me ordering a midnight pizza, is a company like DoorDash when it comes to building community, right? Like these apps have expanded beyond just food to groceries, to supporting local businesses, to supporting even from the pandemic where we really focused on who's owning these businesses. How significant has technology become in terms of building that communal side of things?
Yeah, and that's a great segue because DoorDash just recently celebrated its 10-year anniversary. So you really never know what's going to happen in 10 years. When I was sitting in those seats as a CHCI intern, I'm an alumnus. Don't ask me the year though, because it's longer than 10 years ago. So I hate that question more and more every year. But it's incredibly important to have brick and mortar businesses and people be able to leverage the online platforms that are powering growth. Whether that's through a small mom and pop shop getting on DoorDash, or having someone hop on and hop off as a Dasher, or a customer being able to create a moment. We talk about creating community. We've got the holidays coming up, Thanksgiving, Noche Buena, Christmas, name it. It feels like there's a holiday every day. There's certainly a holiday party in DC every day, it seems like. But I think the ability to translate online actions into real world consequences in a good way, sending food to your sick relative, being able to get that last minute thing for Thanksgiving, being able to ensure that someone feels included when they're feeling down. That's one way to create community, but another way is to leverage our technology. So one thing that I'm really proud of is Project Dash. That's our initiative to have food banks, food pantries, and social impact organizations leverage our technology. So food banks and food pantries work with us. A Dasher comes, picks up charitable food or essential items, and then they take it to someone's home. And that person can be a senior, immunocompromised, or facing other transportation challenges, just like I'm a single mom and I can't get to the food bank or food pantry because their hours aren't as open as grocery stores, or reducing stigma. So being able to use what we've built and continue building, whether it be grocery delivery via SNAP EBT, via flowers to make you have a better day. Certainly my mom likes flower delivery, so jury's out on how much I'm saving with that one. But I think it's been really impactful to see what we've been able to accomplish in 10 years, and it's really impactful to see how online work translates into improving people's lives and creating the memories that they're going to cherish for years to come.
Speaking of taboo, something that makes older generations in the Latino community very uncomfortable, but we're going to talk about it now, is mental health. I don't know if you saw on Saturday Night Live, they had a recent episode where he says, I have depression to his abuelita, and she's like, no, you don't. You just like to stay in the dark. That's it. It's such an uncomfortable conversation for them to have. It's something certainly I've had with my parents who just we just didn't talk about it. But now social media and online resources allow us to talk about it much better. And I feel like our generation is much more comfortable talking about our anxiety or depression or whatever we're dealing with. But there's good and bad, right? We can utilize those resources to help us, but then there's the no-brainer side effects of how social media can just be so draining. So Cesar, I want to turn it to you. When it comes to mental health, what are the impacts we're seeing right now, good and bad?
So I'm sure people are familiar with all the the media and the research that has been conducted over the last 15 years on social media. All of that research, all that body of research has a lot of important findings, a lot of things that are translatable to our daily lives, but it also has a lot of limitations. When these big headings appear on the news or on different type of media, we don't often think of those limitations that are important and may actually be a barrier to use those results as something like a blanket statement. But what we know so far from the studies that have been conducted is that there are potential negative consequences in terms of the time that one engages with social media as a whole. That counts platforms, that accounts for passive versus active use. Passive as in scrolling through our newsfeed,
scrolling.
or being more active, interacting with other friends. All of that counts as usage. And there is a lot of research, both in terms of surveys that we do to people all the time, and sometimes we do surveys in a longitudinal way, like asking the same person the same questions over time to see if there are changes in their behavior and their mood that may be accounted for depending on the time they spend on social media. And that type of research has found that as we increase the usage in terms of hours per day, there is an increase in risk of a number of negative mental health consequences. Depressive symptoms and anxiety are a couple of them. Also, eating disorders have been closely related to engaging with certain type of content on social media. Now, all of that is the negative that is all over the place. However, there is another side that is extremely important for marginalized communities. And think not only of Latinx people, think of intersecting identities as well. So for example, someone who is Latino and live in a rural community, or someone who is Latino and is developing as a sexual minority, or someone who is Latino and is developing as a gender minority, or a mix of all of those identities. So for these marginalized communities, social media also offers, as we are hearing, and our research also found that, a lot of opportunities for building community, for finding information about these marginalized identities that is not as easily accessible in the physical environment sometimes. A lot of support resources in forms of information, support groups, or actual instruments that you can use, like for example, using a platform to not only order food, but to give job opportunities to people in your community. So there are all of these these benefits that are very important among these marginalized identities that we need to understand a lot better, because there is a chance that we can maybe use these benefits to help individuals who are struggling with mental health conditions. So at the same time that using social media excessively can pose risks in terms of mental health, building community or finding support resources and being able to leverage those resources might benefit a lot of individuals. And that is the side of the research that is growing at this time. But we're going to talk a little bit later about the challenges in order to grow this side of the research, to show and all these potential benefits. That is precisely in terms of the methodologies that we've been using in research so far. Just doing surveys and things like that doesn't seem to be enough to find all that evidence. So there is a next generation of research that is being conducted right now, but it also needs the support of social media companies in order to reap the fruits of that research.
Taking into consideration generations is really important. I know I told you guys the story on our Zoom call, but I'm going to say it again because it gets a good laugh. But generationally, in order to build a community, you have to first build trust. And that can be very difficult to do, right? To go from writing a tangible letter to emailing it, like all of a sudden you're like, who could possibly access that, right? And when I think about this, I think about my grandma who was 90 years old and had her little credit union, and she knew the woman at the bank, and every time she would call her, but this time she called her on the phone, and again, she called her. She's like, hi, I want to, talk about my deposit or whatever she was talking about. And the woman said, hi, Teresa, okay, let's talk about it. But first, can I have your social security number? And all I hear is her say, spam, hang up. And I'm like, you called her. What do you mean spam? But like they, even any transaction over the phone did not earn her trust. And that's something, on a totally different level from my generation is like, I don't know, is this really cheap fast fashion company legit? Like, should I give them my credit card? We're all having different levels of trust. And so, Gonzalo, I'm coming to you now. When we're looking at tools, especially for our finances and for, resources that are going to help us in a variety of different ways, maybe looking for a job or looking for an apartment. There are scammers out there ready to get us if we are not prepared. So do you think we currently have a healthy digital ecosystem? What needs to enhance for it to better cater to us to feel more comfortable engaging in all of these different options?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jackie. And I think what we've seen over the last 3 years is this deep migration to digital. In our case for Opportune, we're used to have a lot of our members coming through stores, on 20% or so. Now 75% are actually coming through our mobile app or through our website. We used to have 4 million visitors to our website. Now we have 10 million visitors to our website. And the vast majority of users use a mobile phone now compared to what it was before. I think as key components for building trust for us and that structure from the beginning, and especially starting serving the Latino community, was servicing Spanish and English at every touch point. And it's sort of central as sort of that component. There's although someone may feel more comfortable speaking in English in certain situations for learning about a loan or savings, they actually may prefer to have that covered in Spanish because they feel more comfortable around disclosures and things like that. Second, actually offering the channel of choice that's preferred to the different audiences. Although we have a lot of traffic through mobile, we have call centers in Spanish and English where you can talk to a human at any moment. And if you want to go to a store, you can walk into a store and open an application. And then last is just the use of technology to facilitate we've extended over $14 billion in loans, and you don't need to have a past credit history, not even US ID or SSN. And over the 17 years that we've been in business, that's kind of built trust across the board. Similarly, we also have a savings app. So we can give you cash or money when you need it, but also at the same time, we want to kind of lead to better outcomes. And our savings app has helped our members save over $8 billion. And for new members, on average, after the first 12 months, they're able to save around on average, $1,800. So from kind of bring back to your question, yes, there's a lot of risk potentially out there of potential scams and so forth. The ability to kind of hit on building trust through participating in the community through the use of language in Spanish and English, access to channels and technology, building that over time has played out really well for Opportune over the past 17 years. And I think to add into a little bit to what Keith was saying is also the impact of taking someone from into the financial mainstream and getting access to building their credit and being able to make a down payment in for a mortgage, or being able to buy a car. That's a step up as far as what they could do with those the benefits of being part of the financial services, financial mainstream gives them. And then just a few examples of being able to take on a loan to help with the health care of your abuelita in Guatemala, or one use case that we saw recently, and it kind of brings together a little bit of the social media aspect as well, is if you get a very close friend invited one of our customers to be a bridesmaid into her wedding, and of course that actually is a lot of expenses, from getting the dress to the travel to everything that's involved. You have a WhatsApp group chat where everybody's talking about it, but it is an emotional moment if you're going to be able to afford all of that. And we were able to use one of our loans to support someone have the moment, like a great moment in life that you only have once. Go through that experience and able to pay us back, right? And then close the loan and live through that moment, something maybe she would not have been able to experience. And then lastly, I think the ability to help our members save is phenomenal, because that really leads to even better outcomes. Instead of having to borrow and pay interest, if you're able to set aside $1,800 or more, if you want to travel, or if you want to have a down payment for an apartment, or help with a down payment for a rental, that can make a big difference in someone's life.
Yeah, of course. I mean, money's tight, right?
Yeah.
And I think something that I'm currently dealing with, and I'm sure most of you soon will be dealing with, is, man, I pay a lot of rent. Maybe I should buy a house. It turns out that's really hard to do. And I've learned that, we have a long way to go here in the States when it comes to financial literacy and understanding what tools are available to us. Everyone keeps telling me, like, there's so many programs for a first-time Latino home buyer. And then you go online, and I'm like, I don't know who's legitimate on this or not. And now I'm like, they say they're government-backed, or they say they're whatever department-backed, and it's really hard online to suss it out. So Lily, going to you, I feel like www is like Wild West Web these days, because I'm just like, I don't know where I am or how I ended here, and now I'm having all these targeted ads for places that might be legit or like ready to take all my money and my identity. So what challenges do we face to keep these platforms accountable, right? And to make sure that we're keeping ourselves safe. But I think accountability is the really big umbrella phrase here when it comes to especially our money.
Definitely. And it's our money, our housing, our safety. If you have kids, like your health, access to like real information, right? Being able to combat some of the mis and disinfo. A lot of this stuff is really critical. And as I shared at the beginning, all these stats where we're like the majority voices on these platforms, which is also why we have to be very, very careful in how we're leveraging them, right? I think some of the comments about mental health is really important, because we are also being disproportionately impacted. And one of the things that I do want to share, especially when we think about where we're at right now in the world of policy around keeping these platforms accountable, is that for too long, a lot of the responsibility is on the shoulders of us as users, right? When you think about when you're downloading an app, you just like scroll, yeah, accept the terms. I just want to get into the app and like use it. Well, you have what you don't know, and this is part of a consumer rights learning as well as advocacy efforts that we need to do more of, because you may not know what you did when you just uploaded the new version of Snapchat, where now every time you take a filter, a picture, now your face is now part of their AI algorithm that is going to be used. You don't know where your image is going to be ending up anyway, right? Which is why there's a role for policy to be in these conversations, because you as an individual taking on a bunch of these tech companies is like David and Goliath, right? It's also not fair. But there's also different ways that we can improve the products on both ends. Especially, I'll just share from the Caper Center perspective, we have two grants partners, two Latina-led organizations, one called Free Press, and one of the issues, Free Press and Equities Research. And one of the sentiments that we're seeing more and more grow is that for a long time, all these economic reports that talk about the Latinx community of being such a faithful like brand user and consumer, actually the distrust in our community is growing. and is growing rapidly, and is even growing within families. How many of you here, whether your mom, cousins, uncles, have had really hard discussions, or maybe you don't even talk, you left the WhatsApp channel, or you left certain channels because somebody's saying misinfo. And you're like, wait, that's not correct. And then before you know, you're upset at your own family member, right? And so there's a lot of these divisions that are happening within our own homes. So what can we do about it? Especially as we get into the election year, we have to be really careful. And this is where I encourage you all to check out Free Press and Equis Research reports, because what we're seeing is that a lot of these protections that were there around content moderation, that were there about like which ad gets to you first, why is the algorithm deciding these factors, what's the monetization? A lot of these protections that were there, unfortunately, got rolled back. And that's dangerous, right? Because now is those types of content moderation protections that we had are not there. And what makes it worse is that non-English Spanish is one of the harder, it's an area that's not even getting the attention that it deserves to combat when there's mis and disinfo happening. So to your point earlier, these are jobs that we all want you all to be part of as well to help combat that, because there's a cultural nuance. Just in the Latin culture, like I'm from Bolivia, a word in Bolivia may have, the same word may mean such a different meaning in like Colombia, Puerto Rico, Cuban, whatever, right? There's like that part is missing. And unfortunately, the stats are showing that through the WhatsApp channel, through different types of social media, the way we engage and connect with our communities, we're also one of the biggest targets for mis and disinformation propaganda. And it's coming through our abuelitas, it's coming through our tias, cousins. And so I want to raise the effort that it's a policy conversation, that folks are working on it. And as consumers, we also need to make sure that we're pickier with what we're using, why we're using it, and having a better balance, and knowing that you could also opt out of this. So just putting that into your all's perspective, because it's going to be a two-way balance for this.
Yeah, well, buckle up. 2024 is going to get weird.
Exactly.
So, well, staying on this track, we only have about 10 minutes left, and I want to cover a couple more things. So I want to do a little speed round. Lily kind of covered her end of it, but I just want to go down the line here and just give me your best tip or trick for identifying misinformation or disinformation. We'll start with you, Cesar.
So our best trick is actually talking to people who are seeing that misinformation on an everyday basis. So what we do is we collect as much examples of social media data that we can, and we actually gather with members of the community so they can help us identify the ways in which Latinos, for example, are being, or young Latino people are being targeted by tobacco companies on social media with things as things like the music or the way people dress that might be more enticing for a Latino teen, or using popular people on social media that talk about their experience as a Latino, but at the same time they are playing a music that talks about a tobacco product, or they actually show it in the background and things like that. So the way that we do in research is actually go to the source, go to the people who are dealing with that misinformation, and we learn from them.
You make a great point about influencers, right? I remember Kim Kardashian got in trouble for saying she made all this money on cryptocurrency, but she didn't say, this is an ad, and then all these people went to go get this, and it's like, yeah, girl, you make money because you have so much, money. Of course you made money. All right, Keith, you're up.
Yeah, I think this is misinfo on a micro level, but I would trust yourself, trust but verify. So for example, at DoorDash with Dashers, we have a support chatbot in Spanish, for example, where a Dasher, if they're confused, they can talk to the customer in the Dasher's own language, and it's simultaneously translated to the customer's own language. Same thing with the customer. If you're confused about an order, contact support. Although it seems like small things, it can really make a big difference in someone's life and their immediate, like whether they're going to get an order or not, or whether they're going to the right place. So I would say don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah, and I think specific to loans is just understanding of the clarity of the fees, what the interest rate, if there's an origination fee, and just make that very clear. And then additionally, the company you work for, just as Opportune does, just gives you a very good sense of the size of the monthly payment, so you're able to interpret how much of your budget you'll be able to use, whether it's on a 2-week schedule or a monthly schedule. Having that prominence early on as you're making a decision makes to kind of a really good understanding if it's a legitimate company or not.
And I'll just quickly add that as we're seeing more and more generative AI come in, it's going to be harder and harder to differentiate between what's real, what's not. You all saw Bad Bunny got two fake songs coming, right? But the quote now is, "Hey puppy, be careful, the AI." So it's true. Like artists with so much deep dollars, with lawyers, they're still having issues, right? But when we think about how a lot of these types of mis and dis, with whatever purpose, without verifying the data, it might come through very social channels. Like we're like, oh, that was so funny. And it's generative AI that are images that aren't really real. Unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of that right now with what's happening with Palestine and Israel, and the types of ways that a lot of social media has been being utilized. And some of the images are happening. On the positive side, there's a lot of policy and legislation coming to help us better understand and have just a simple watermark that says like this was generated by AI, right? Yeah. So there are those very tactical things. Actually, the Caper Center, the foundation, we're part of 10 foundations are working with the BP Harris's office on understanding how do we build AI for public interest. How do we build it for you, with you in mind, right? And so there's a lot of work coming in, and I think that it's going to really require us to also just start at our tables with our families, be like, if it's missing the little letter at the end, don't click on it. I think our parents are getting a little bit savvy, even my mom. My mom sees some kind of like random post on Facebook. She's like, what is this? I'm like, Mom, that's not true. That's not the real data. And like, there's fake videos happening, right? From the deep fakes. Yeah. So it's super hard. So this is going to be important to have a public-private, multi-stakeholder approach. And we need the platform companies to help us also do this and also be accountable for that.
I think on the media side, you know, this is something, not only for my job when I'm looking at information, I don't want to relay stats or news to you that's not true. So I have to kind of double down and go exactly straight to the source. As Keith mentioned, going to the source is really important. But I think, especially now, you know, the idea of who's verified is really hard to know. Like, I'm not about to pay Elon to have a little blue check mark, but now these blue check mark people, I'm like, oh no, they're gonna cancel me. And then they have like 400 followers. I'm like, oh, you're fine. But that was kind of what we relied on to make sure that we were talking to somebody legit or a legit celebrity. And turns out that now they can just pay to say, hey, I'm important to me. And okay. So I always try to look at it, if I'm reading data, okay, who said that? And they just sourced an activist. Right. Like literally anyone can be an activist. So I need a name and a title to be able to find them. Or what study, you know, is it going from a .org or a .gov study? I think that's going to be something you bank on no matter what. But if those news outlets don't have a link to take you a step further to show you what they had, then I, you know, kind of only give it a second thought and move on, because it's a really, really dangerous game that you play. And back to the AI point, I mean, there are already 2024 candidates who are putting out campaign videos completely AI-based, and you very quickly can lose that trust. So, you know, I think in every aspect of our lives, when it comes to shopping and making sure that we're buying from someone legitimate or investing our money or applying for a job or a house, you need to make sure that that person is someone you actually can you know, get your bang for your buck and really feel that reassurance. Gonzalo, how important is it going to be in the next 10 years to really push forward these types of messages of saying, hey, we are legit, here's what backs us up? What kind of messaging is that going to look like? Is it going to end with, you know, a watermark norm? Is it going to end with a little disclaimer or a hashtag? What's it going to take for people to really feel they can trust an institution? Yeah,
things are evolving very, very fast, but I think that there's that mix of the community aspect at a local level and having that presence and validation in the real world, whether it's through your stores or through community events sponsored by the organization and building that trust at the grassroots. I think that will continue to remain important going forward. And then using that as the pivot to bring the digital content as both an element of validation and this kind of social proof where those who attend the events, whether it's in person or online, kind of build that credibility to the specific brand or service that you're providing. I think for us that's a key component, and there's the nature of proof points around being, for example, being able to save, which is incredibly difficult, if you will, from not knowing when it's a little bit like having how we used to drive, or many years ago, maybe you never had to do it, like with having a map to go from one point A to point B and like looking at the exits and so forth, versus now with Google Maps, you just put the destination, you get there, and you trust what it tells you. I think in our case, for our savings app, it's similar, right? You don't need to run a budget or balance your checkbook. So behind the scenes, it's taking money from your checking account, putting it into your savings, and we build trust with our members, where suddenly they have $1,000 saved there, and they actually didn't have to put any effort doing it. That's a big validation for us, and actually they didn't go out and use it. So we're not really asking them to keep the $1,000. Whatever goal they had, they actually withdraw $1,000 and then use it for what they wanted. Those small elements do scale and build trust because I think after healthcare, financial services is kind of central to people's lives, and we've managed to use that as a element of trust and commitment with an audience.
Thank you for that. We only have a couple minutes left, and I want to do another speed round. We're very fortunate to be in a place where we're literally surrounded by lawmakers. I mean, there's so many even just on this floor right now responsible for making sure policy and legislation is on track to protect us and to assist us when all of us are ready to buy our homes or invest or insert big life decisions here. It's these lawmakers who are responsible for this. So I want to go, we'll start with Lily this time, coming down. What legislation in the works or policy conversations are you especially focused on or really think need to be established in the near future?
Definitely. The last 2 weeks ago, when the executive order from President Biden came out on Monday, and then on Wednesday, the VP Harris's framework came out. There was also OMBD guidelines, which is federal agencies. And plus, with our experts that we've provided supports through grants that are leading scholars of color. And I want to make sure that I reemphasize that because it's important that we are investing in our leaders and our communities with the lived journey to be able to help bring more of the humanity into these policies. And so what I've been doing for the last 2.5, 3 years is really diving into how is all this advancement in technology, especially automation and AI, impacting us. So I think those guidelines that have come out 2 weeks ago, I've been in the weeds thinking about and working with experts who are being part of these forums, right, that are informing the policy, is what's going to happen with the implementation. A lot of the detail, the really hardcore, big, impactful things are going to be, how does this get implemented? And so my work right now is looking at it from a federal perspective, but also looking at what are states doing. New York and California published their AI guidelines. What was the community outreach for that? What was the representation of the Latinx community in some of the 2 states that has some of the highest population, right? So I think for me, it's really making sure that wherever I go, I'm including the perspective of our community, supporting the experts from our communities to help advise that. And so I would say that the number one thing right now, if you go to ai.gov, is think about what are also the ways that from jobs perspective, we're going to be in a huge need of talent that is not just technical, but our social scientists are looking at policy, our educators, our career transitions, because we need more of you all inside these types of roles to help make sure that that implementation has teeth. And I think at this moment that where the clock is ticking. So it's about 180 days before a lot of these reports and guidelines have to be happening. And so I encourage you all to also go and check out how you can create comments and statements to be a help advice, because we have till December 5th. As a community to provide input in this. So I would say that that's my number one priority at the moment, in making sure that we're engaging the voices that haven't been engaged yet.
We are a little bit on the edge of time for Q&A, and I want to make sure that all of you are able to address our audience. So I want to just end with, Cesar, is there a specific policy or effort right now in DC that you think lawmakers should really be focused on?
Well, there is. There's there's a bill that has been circulating for almost a year to try to increase safety of social media platforms, especially thinking about youth. One thing that would be very important is to not to legislate based on fear. It's very important to remember as well that for a large group of marginalized communities, access to social media means access to, as we were saying, support, community, and a lot of potential benefits. Taking away access to these platforms in a form of partial or total banning, or in a form of forcing reduction in consumption and things like that, might inadvertently affect that access to those support resources that might be worse than the intended cure. So that would be something important, I think.
I promise, really, I know the clock is over, but we talked about jobs, we talked about behind the scenes and all these tech things, but I think it's the perfect segue to remind all of us that it's so important to be electing young people, because who knows these apps better than we do? How many hearings have you heard, a 70-year-old senator ask what TikTok is or how does it work? Should those people be making the policies that are impacting you? I don't know. It's kind of a risk. Okay, questions. I'm ready. I know we have a microphone for people in the audience. It's important that you engage. Yes, sir. Hello. Tell us your name and who your question's for.
My name is Roland Roebuck. I'm with the Afro-Latino Institute in Washington, D.C. Impressive the high number of Latinos that are online. My question is, how does that connection translate into political power? Number two, I'm interested in knowing how technology can mitigate the level of exclusion and racism that exists within the Hispanic community, impacting Afro-Latinos that are many times excluded from the Hispanic experience.
Lily, I feel like you would be
Yeah.
a good one for this one, for this
Definitely.
double hitter.
Especially because when we think about also these stats that I shared earlier, right? What's not known is, if we go through the details, that the fastest growing population within the Latino community is Afro-Latinx. We actually also have very multicultural, those kids that I was talking about that are in elementary, that's a reflection of many different multicultures, and especially the Afro-Latinx. And I do think that, especially now being what speaking from the Caper Center, we actually did a partnership with Consumer Reports called badinput.org. So if you go to badinput.org, you'll be able to see 3 case studies that we did around how algorithmic discrimination shows up, specifically disproportionately impacting the Black communities, especially when we think about the red line histories that in the cities that we're currently operating in. A lot of the times, as we saw that those decisions that were made many generations before us are still impacting who has basic access to affordable internet, right? We're talking about AI, but yet we still have this underinvested infrastructure, and that goes to schools, that goes beyond the internet connectivity, the jobs, the types of options you have to live there. And then when you think about it and you apply it, it was straight up racism structured in everything that we've been doing. So I definitely appreciate the question, because we have to look at it very nuanced. And through that badinput.org campaign, we looked at how this impacts housing mortgages, how this impacts financial, but also how it impacts health. Because if you think about during the pandemic, we relied a lot on the oximeter, right? But it's something that's been around for so long, but the darker your skin was, the less accurate it was. So it's important that we have this very specific intersectional lenses in everything that we're doing. And so I think especially in technology, that's one of the things that we're looking at. How does algorithmic bias show up? How do we clean the data before we get there? We have to make sure what data are we using, and go in with that historical contextual lens and say, well, how do I know that, what are the implications, right, that of this data? You can't just take it blindly. And we've seen a lot of these tech companies, as they pushed out certain products so early, how it was racist, it was discriminatory. Fortunately, we have Department of Justice, we have the EEOC, we have different agencies who are also being able to come together and do class action lawsuits to protect us as consumers. So there's definitely a lot of nuance, and that type of nuanced conversation is what we need at the moment.
And I think just to touch on the first part of your question in terms of politics, Gonzalo mentioned, a trust because there needs to be terms of agreement in Spanish, right? There is a severely low percentage of voting information in Spanish, depending on where you live. It shouldn't just be for the Southwest or people just by the border. We're the emerging majority and there needs to be materials out there. So what that can do is cause misinformation where people are voting for the wrong candidate that maybe doesn't suit their needs, or they're not voting at all because they don't think that they matter because they're not getting the communication that they need. Let's hop to another question. Up in the front here.
Hello, my name is Natalia Galvez. I'm currently a CHCI intern, and obviously Latinos play a huge role in the political landscape. So my question to you guys would be, what policies can internet companies and social media sites adopt to help combat the misinformation and the Spanish language misinformation specifically?
I think this is in your realm of expertise here. It's a big question.
It is a big question. Well, misinformation is actually not my realm of expertise. However, in terms of misinformation, one thing that that we believe in research, social media companies need to be more open is about opening access to social media data for research. The only way in which we researchers can help the community over time is having access to objective data that we can analyze to identify instances of misinformation and how this misinformation is transmitted through different channels in order to potentially prevent future instances. Right now, and that is the new wave in this type of research that we're trying to conduct. But one of the challenges is the access to that data. So in that sense, policy making wise, and in terms of reaching out to these companies, they need to think about better ways of ensuring that the community has access to the data that they're generating on social media, so they can choose to potentially open that data to researchers in order to better understand how all of these interactions are happening. For as long as we keep conducting research that is merely focused on asking surveys or things like that, our results will not be as reliable as they could be if we have access to objective data.
And I would just add to check out Disinfo Defense League, which is a coalition of 140 plus civil rights organizations, grassroots organizations that are working, and they have a platform of like, well, these are our asks for the tech companies. And I think to your point, one of the key things was being able to have transparency of the data for an academia, so then that way we can conduct more disparate impact analysis and things like that that can give us better understanding of how these algorithms really operate and the monetization behind it.
Sure. Who's next?
We have one question that was submitted to us on the back end, so we'll end with this last one. What specific suggestions or strategies do you recommend for Latinos to leverage our collective power and actively contribute to shaping the narrative or influencing positive change on social media?
Keith, I feel like this is for you.
Well, hopefully so. And I think that one of the things that we've seen, both at DoorDash and in my previous life at Univision and in Congress is people getting involved, and whether it's getting involved in a community organization, like a food bank, food pantry, something you can do, like literally this holiday break, go volunteer locally, make a change, make a difference, whether it's registering to vote, or whether it's doing something else. I think the one quibble I'd have with the question is on social media. I think a lot of times when you show up, it's got to be also in person and in the community, because that's how you make your voice heard. When it comes to, ensuring that Latino issues are heard, I think all issues are Latino issues. Food access is a Latino issue, the economy is a Latino issue, education is a Latino issue. So to make our voice heard, we've got to get involved in every issue and make sure that we are doing the right thing when it comes to policy, as far as getting involved, saying what you need to say, doing what you need to do, and having the opportunities to really encourage innovative policymaking, whether it's on food access with TFAP and CSFP, whether it's a retirement bill that helps make retirement savings earlier for people with non-traditional jobs. Really, whatever you do, make sure it's impactful, and make sure it empowers your local community.
Yeah, it's true. We're not a community that only just cares about immigration, despite what news directors or politicians think about us.
That's right. One quick thing I'll mention is that a lot of the misinformation and kind of output out there tends to want to divide us instead of bringing us together. And I think just bringing that awareness of noticing that, and also talking to each other around, is this trying to bring us together or separate us? If you feel that it's driving a division, that's a big red flag to identify and actually seek ways to call that out, because the majority of the time is seeking to divide rather than bring together. And I think that's been a consistent theme throughout.
I would end it with saying that there's power in numbers, right? There is power in all of us coming together. I think even in my own career, I had a little bit of an identity crisis entering an industry where, it's the hot, white, blonde girl who gets to go on camera, and I felt so isolated. And then I discovered NAHJ and realized there are journalists that look and sound just like me everywhere. And suddenly that reignited this, energy in me to take pride in my culture and to stand up and make sure my voice is heard, going in person and connecting with people, connecting with the trailblazers and the big firsts who can tell me to keep going or what we need to do next for the people behind me. And we can do a lot more change if we do it together. I want to thank our panel for being here. It's been a really lovely discussion. And thank all of you for coming and joining us. I think that wraps up our session today. So thank you for coming.
Thanks,